I was once humiliated for having a voice that didn't sound American. And now, that very voice brought me to the stage to receive America's highest honor. My name is Sofia Jimenez. I come from Maracaibo, Venezuela, where the sun scorches like fire and women know how to speak with their eyes. But in America, everything is different. I tried my hardest to speak right accent, right words, right rhythm. I recorded every English sentence, practiced pronunciation until my throat went raw. As a weather anchor for a local Los Angeles station, I knew every breath I took was being judged. And then came that moment. Monday morning, 7:58 a.m. I sat behind a green screen, mic clipped to my collar, snug cream bodycon dress hugging my frame, hair curled, lips painted rose. I delivered the forecast with a trained smile. Everything seemed fine until I pronounced humidity as humidity. The director screamed into my earpiece. "Cut, Sophia, again? How many times now? You're broadcasting to Americans, not Venezuelans." I froze. Laughter echoed from the tech booth. I glanced sideways and saw Veronica, the blonde production assistant, lips glossy like they'd been dipped in honey, wearing a skirt that barely reached mid-thigh, smirking at the director. They often stood too close after shoots. His hand always found her lower back. His eyes always wandered farther down. I knew, in this place, it wasn't enough to sound right. You had to flirt right, too. The director, Brian, stormed onto the set. He yanked off his headset, pointed straight at me in front of the entire crew. "How many times do I have to say it? You sound like someone selling empanadas in a street market. You should be in the kitchen of some Latin restaurant, not on my set." No one said a word. I stood there. My cheeks burned. I didn't dare meet anyone's eyes, just caught Veronica's lips curl upward before she turned away. I don't even remember how I left the studio. On the way home, I pulled out my phone and replayed the segment. I forced myself to listen. Was my voice really that bad? Did those deep, rolling vowels mean I didn't belong on television? Or had they never wanted an immigrant woman like me to succeed in the first place? I returned to my cramped apartment in South Central. Mateo, my son, was watching cartoons. He looked up, beaming. "Mom, were you on TV today?" I smiled, but didn't answer. I didn't have the strength to tell his mother had just been humiliated in public. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror and wiped off my makeup. My eyes were red, my lips still smudged with gloss. I wore a thin camisole, bare shoulders trembling under the warm yellow light. A faint bruise surfaced on my upper arm from when Brian had gripped my shoulder hard during last week's meeting, after I refused his off-the-record invitation. He had leaned in and whispered, "You should know how to say thank you if you want to stay here longer." I pretended not to understand, but I understood perfectly. I once caught Veronica walking out of the director's office at 9 p.m. wearing a man's dress shirt. The next day, she got promoted. I used to believe talent was enough, but in this world, for women like me, brown-skinned, accented, from a poor country, we either stay silent or learn how to use our bodies as weapons. I'd never learned how to do that, but lately I started to wonder if it was time I did. A few days later, I was called into a meeting. Brian looked me up and down like I was a discounted item on a shelf. Sophia, we just don't see you fitting into the station's new image strategy. I'm sorry, but take this as an opportunity to find where you truly belong. I wanted to scream, but I just nodded because I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Outside the building, I paused in front of a glass window. I caught my reflection. The midday sun hit my chest through the sheer white shirt, every curve visible. And I thought, if the world insists on seeing only the surface, then let that surface be the first thing they can't look away from. If I have to use my voice and my body to reclaim my space, then I will. 2 days after I was fired, I got the eviction notice. The landlord, Mr. Jenkins, an old man with silver hair who lived downstairs, cited redevelopment of the area into a high-end residential zone and said he didn't want immigrant tenants devaluing the neighborhood. I stood frozen outside the door, the paper trembling in my hand. Mateo clutched his stomach and asked softly, "Mom, are we moving again?" I didn't answer. Something inside me cracked, sharp and silent. It wasn't just the job. I was losing the last piece of ground I'd been clinging to. That night, Jace came over. He knocked softly, as always. His long hair tied back, shirt unbuttoned at the top, revealing sun-bronzed skin and a small tattoo on his collarbone, a snake wrapped around a flame. I hadn't planned to open the door, but I did. Standing there in an old t-shirt and thin cotton shorts, my eyes swollen from crying, I watched him enter without a word. He placed his hand gently on my waist and kissed my cheek. "Who made you cry?" he whispered. I broke. My forehead sank against his chest. "No one. Everyone. The whole world." We sat on the torn sofa. Mateo was already asleep. Jace poured wine from a bottle he brought and placed the glass in my hand. "You can speak in front of a camera, Sophia," he said. "You've been on TV, so why not speak to the world on your own terms?" I laughed bitterly. With this accent, they'd laugh me off the internet. He looked at me differently then, softer, deeper. Then let them hear it, so much they can't forget it. Don't you get it? They fear your voice because it doesn't obey, because it reminds them that America doesn't sound just one way. I sat quietly, fingers brushing my hair back, tucking a dark strand behind my ear. "Are you saying I should become an influencer?" Jay smirked, tilted his head. "No, you don't have to become anything. You just need to tell your story." The next morning, after Mateo left for school, Jace and I filmed my first video. I wore a red stretch-knit off-the-shoulder dress, tight enough to get attention, modest enough for YouTube. My hair loose down my back, lips glossed in warm nude, eyes straight into the lens. I spoke in English, but my English, the kind shaped by childhood in Maracaibo, the kind with imperfect syllables, the kind never molded by Harvard. I spoke about getting fired, about the ridicule, the harassment, and surviving anyway. Jay stood behind the camera, quietly smiling the whole time. After we uploaded the video, I turned off my phone out of fear. But an hour later, Jace shouted from the living room, "Sophia, 10,000 views!" I ran out, eyes wide, heart racing. 10,000 people were listening to my voice. 3 days later, the video hit 1.2 million views. The comments were overflowing, applause, encouragement, and hundreds of stories from immigrant women, single moms, people who'd been judged for their voices and their names. I read every line. It felt like someone was stitching my heart back together. Then came a message from an account named @VeronicaVision. Who do you think you are, telling your cheap story for views? Don't forget you got fired because your voice was garbage. I didn't reply. I just sent back a kiss emoji. Jace, Mateo, and I decided to name the channel Casa Reina, the Queen's House, because now I finally knew who I was. That night, I filmed another video. No script, no makeup. I wore Jace's oversized white shirt, 3 buttons done, nothing underneath. Sat on the bedroom floor, warm yellow light spilling over my cheekbones. I looked straight into the lens and said, "This voice once cost me my job, but now it's the reason people finally listen." Jace came over, sat behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist. His hand slid gently up my bare thigh. I didn't stop him, because this was my house, my world, and I would tell it my way. We uploaded videos weekly, and just 2 months in, Casa Reina hit 500,000 subscribers. I didn't expect it, not really. That a woman once scolded for mispronouncing humidity was now collaborating with top brands, makeup, lingerie, even speaking courses for immigrants. One Friday night, I did my first live stream. I wore a thin beige silk slip dress, hair casually pinned up, the back open. Jace stood off camera, but every now and then he'd lean in, wearing nothing but a towel around his waist, pretending to grab water. And fans lost it. Comments poured in. "Your voice is so sexy. Sophia needs to start an ASMR podcast. She proves immigrant accents are assets, not burdens." I laughed out loud. Mateo wandered out from the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, are you done live streaming? I'm hungry." I pulled him into frame, kissed his cheek. This is why I keep going. But the brighter things got, the more fear crept in. It all happened so fast. I felt like I was living in a bubble, one pinprick away from bursting. And that pin came from the past. An email arrived in the Casa Reina inbox. Subject, booking opportunity from KNT Channel, former employer. "Hi, Sophia. Our new exec team is interested in featuring you in a special segment on immigrant success stories. Let us know if you'd like to collaborate. We can discuss rates, format, and visibility." KNT Channel, the very place that once threw me out for sounding like a street vendor. I stared at the screen. Pain came rushing back. I couldn't eat that night. I sat out on the balcony, red wine in hand, the wind brushing my silk nightgown across my skin. The back of it slid low over my shoulders. Jace came behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my bare shoulder. "You don't have to go back to a place that disrespected you," he whispered. "But you can, if you want them to see what they threw away." I turned to him. The golden balcony light reflected in his eyes. "I don't want forgiveness," I said. "I want to see the look in their eyes when they realize I was worth more than they ever imagined." The next morning, I replied with a calm, sharp tone. "Thank you, KNT Channel. I'll participate only if I have full control over my image and content. No voice editing, no scripted lines. If that's a problem, I understand." They agreed immediately. Too fast. Desperation has a scent. I recognized it. The shoot was scheduled at the old studio. My hands trembled slightly walking in. Not much had changed except a new poster that read, "Diversity is power." How ironic. Veronica was gone.
In her place, a young Korean assistant adjusted my mic with trembling hands and sad eyes. She whispered, "You're the reason I dared apply here. I listen to your podcast every night." I smiled, squeezed her hand gently. On stage, I sat center spotlight. A black velvet dress with a slit up the thigh, deep cut in the back. My voice, still the same, thick with my mother tongue, deep, sultry, but clear, and unapologetically mine. This place once rejected me for my voice, but no one gets to take my story away unless I let them. Silence. Then applause. The program's coordinator, a black man who was clearly the new face of equality, came to me afterward. "Sophia, you just created a moment of broadcast history." I nodded, but my eyes searched for one person. And just as I turned toward the studio door, he appeared. Brian. No suit, no director's aura, just a tech guy coiling mic cables, shirt wrinkled, face older. He looked up and froze. A dry smile, rough voice. "Hey, Sophia. Long time." I didn't move toward him. I just smiled. My accent still hasn't been fixed, but now people pay to hear it. And I walked away. My heels echoed against the studio floor that once made me tremble. Now, not anymore.
I didn't go straight home after the taping. Instead, I ordered an Uber to a place that once felt like hell for me and my son. 917 Hoover Avenue, the old building we lived in when we first came to America. Peeling walls, creaky elevators, and Mr. Jenkins' judgmental stares every time I came home late holding takeout for Mateo. Right there, on those steps, he once said to me, "You don't belong here. People like you drag down the property value." I cried myself to sleep that night, hugging Mateo in a moldy room. But today, I came back, with the building's ownership contract in my handbag. A quiet acquisition handled by Jace and my personal attorney for 4 months. This wasn't just real estate. This was profitable revenge. I stepped into the lobby. Jenkins was still there, now the operations manager, sitting behind the desk like a ghost of his former pride. He looked up, paused, froze. "You're Sophia?" I walked up, placed a manicured hand on the counter. My black fitted suit outlined every inch of my silhouette. The overhead light gleamed against the gold pendant resting between my breasts. "Hello, Mr. Jenkins," I smiled. "I'm here to inform you, I'm the new owner of this building." He fell back into his chair, face pale. I pulled a small wooden plaque from my purse, polished lettering engraved in gold. La Reina Heights. Every voice deserves to be heard. I met his eyes. "And you will be the janitor here, if you want to keep your retirement benefits." Jenkins opened his mouth, maybe to protest, but my gaze silenced him. "You once called me a burden to this neighborhood, so let me raise its value with the very things you used to mock." The following month, after full renovations, I hosted the grand opening of La Reina Heights. Golden string lights twinkled, white banners danced in the breeze. Immigrants of every shade and accent gathered in the courtyard. One corner displayed before-after photos of the building, from rotting walls to sunlit rooms and fresh greenery. Jay stood beside me in an ivory suit, hair down, lips tilted into his signature smirk. He leaned close and whispered, "You turned a scar into a crown." Mateo wore a tiny tux, standing proudly between us like a prince. He raised a small pair of scissors to cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted into applause. That night, I uploaded a special video. I bought the place that kicked me out. No script, no filters. I sat on the couch in nothing but one of Jace's white shirts, long enough to cover my thighs. Next to me, a glass of red wine, and Jace's hand resting gently on my bare leg, fingers stroking absent-mindedly. I looked into the camera.
They once kicked me out for my voice, for my skin, for my roots. But I've learned not just how to survive, but how to bloom on the very soil that once tried to bury me. If you're watching this from a cramped room with dreams no one believes in, believe me, you don't need to fix your accent. You just need to speak louder. My eyes glistened, but not with anger, with fulfillment. The very next morning, I received an email from one of the country's biggest networks. We would love for you to host a new primetime docuseries about immigrant voices across America. I read it over and over, then set my phone down, stepped out onto the balcony. Morning sun kissed my skin, only veiled by its sheer white robe. Jace came up behind me, wrapped me in his arms, his hand slipping beneath the fabric. I leaned into him, eyes half closed. I didn't need to scream anymore. My voice was already loud enough.
It's been over a year since I uploaded my first video. Today, Casa Reina has surpassed 10 million subscribers. I'm no longer just a YouTuber. I've become a symbol, the voice of millions of immigrant women who once stayed silent in a foreign land. Living proof that you don't have to change who you are to be accepted. You just have to be who you are. But I haven't forgotten the man who first made me swallow my voice, Brian. He vanished from the industry after multiple harassment allegations. Not just one victim, 3. Turns out I was just another name on a long list. I read the headlines with zero surprise, but still, I didn't feel peace. Not yet. One morning, I received an email from an independent filmmaker in New York inviting me to audition for the lead role in a film titled Broken Frequencies, a story about an immigrant woman in radio broadcasting, discriminated against for her voice, fighting to save her small community station from corporate takeover. It felt like the role was written for me. That night, Jace and I read the script together. Every line made my skin prickle, not because it was difficult, but because it was real. It was me. I said yes. On the day of the official casting, I walked into the audition room in a black fitted dress with a cinched waist, shoulder-length hair flowing, lips painted deep red, like a declaration of war. The room was filled with people, but one face stopped me in my tracks. Brian. No longer a network executive, now a freelance production assistant. Shabby, deflated, wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes. When I entered, he looked up and froze. I didn't flinch. I stood in the center of the room and delivered the first line from the script. I wasn't born to make your ears comfortable. My voice rang out, still laced with Venezuela, still smoky, sultry, and sharp. No one moved. 1 second of silence. Then, the director stood up, clapping. We don't need to see anyone else. The role is yours, Sophia. Brian exited quietly after the session. Coincidentally, I walked out toward the same parking lot. He lowered his head, tried to avoid me, but I called out, "Brian?" He stopped, turned slowly. "I once thought you could decide the course of my life," I said. He said nothing, didn't deny it, didn't explain. I stepped closer, 1 foot away, my voice calm, precise. Now I know. My voice doesn't need anyone's permission. I turned away, walked toward Jace, waiting beside our brand new black Range Rover, a gift from a Versace sponsorship deal. The car door opened, wind caught my hair, sweeping it behind me like a banner. Jace kissed the back of my hand as I slid into the seat. "The lead role belongs to the woman who refuses to be silenced," he said. I smiled, the smile of a woman who will never apologize for taking up space. The film became a breakout hit. The awards ceremony took place in Beverly Hills. I wore a crimson gown with a dramatic slit, crystal-studded heels, eyes glowing beneath flawless makeup.
When the host called out, "Best Actress in a Leading Role goes to Sofia Jimenez," I rose. Thunderous applause surrounded me. But in my mind, I saw the girl who once cried alone in a filthy bathroom, asking why her voice made the whole world turn its back. Now I knew why. Because the world can't handle a woman who dares to speak truth in a voice they try to erase. I walked up to the mic, trophy in hand, and said, "This statue doesn't belong to the clearest pronunciation. It belongs to the one who speaks up when the world tells her to shut up." I looked directly into the national broadcast camera. If you're watching this from a tiny room, your voice doesn't sound like anyone else's, and people keep telling you to stop trying. Look at me. I am you, and one day you will be me.
After the award ceremony, a media storm swept through my life. Messages flooded in, hundreds of calls from film studios, TV networks, and global brands. I was no longer just a storyteller on YouTube. I had become the face of linguistic freedom, ambassador of the national Speak As You Are campaign sponsored by the government. But what weighed on me most was Mateo. My little boy wasn't so little anymore. He no longer clung to my leg asking for midnight pizza. He was growing up and beginning to understand how the world viewed his mother. One evening, he walked into my room while I was live streaming for a luxury lingerie brand. I wore a silk robe, off the shoulder. Beneath the sheer veil, a silver designer bra hugged my curves. Studio lights kissed my skin, making me look like a goddess from a painting. He stood there for a moment, silent, then asked, "Mom, are you being exploited?" The question struck me. I turned off the stream immediately and walked over to hold him. "No, baby. Mom's choosing how she wants to be seen." "But do you have to dress like that?" I laughed gently, brushing his hair. "What I wear doesn't change what I say. My body isn't wrong. My voice isn't wrong. People fear both because they've never understood either." Mateo nodded. Something shifted in his eyes. A bit of maturity, a flicker of pride. A week later, I received another invitation, but not from Hollywood. A major real estate company wanted me to be the face of a campaign to revitalize South Central, the very neighborhood where I had once been evicted. I asked one question: who's heading this campaign? The answer stunned me. Veronica. Yes, the Veronica, the blonde assistant who once smirked when I got yelled at on set. Now she was the director of communications, and she wanted to make peace. I agreed, but on my terms. On the day of signing, I arrived at their headquarters in a glossy black jumpsuit, deep V neckline plunging to my navel, waist cinched with a rhinestone-studded belt. Veronica came out to greet me, awkward, overly sweet. "Sophia, you look amazing. I want to apologize for back then." I raised my hand to stop her. "I don't need apologies. I need my worth." I pulled out a printed campaign draft designed entirely by me. No voice editing, no dream editing. The key visual: me in a red dress holding Mateo, standing in front of our renovated old building, now a community center for immigrants. Veronica flipped through the pages, eyes misty. "I never imagined you'd go this far." I looked at her. No bitterness, no spite. Neither did I, until I realized nothing could stop me anymore. 3 months later, La Reina Voices Community Center opened. I stood at the podium. Behind me, the building that once kicked me and my son onto the street. Now it gleamed cream white, balconies trimmed in gold. Its logo, a speaker crowned with a stylized royal crest. Jace stood beside me in a cream suit. Mateo, in a white shirt, clutching a small guitar, sang "Color of My Words," a song I wrote just for him. His voice still small, but steady.
People cried. I did too. That night, after everyone had gone, I stayed alone on the rooftop. Glass of wine in hand, bare feet up on the railing, my nightgown barely a whisper against the wind. A voice behind me. You know, your voice is the most beautiful song I've ever heard. I turned. Jay stood there, shirt half buttoned, eyes glowing with unsaid things. I didn't answer. I just stepped toward him, let the fabric fall from my shoulders. And under the moonlight, there were no more words, only skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat. And in that moment, I understood one thing. I never spoke wrong. I was just never allowed to speak. But now, the world had no choice but to listen.